In the hidden folds of existence, there lies a membrane thinner than breath, a veil of perception separating your current state from your true, unbounded essence. This veil is not breached by intellect, nor pierced by logic, but gently caressed aside by the sacred geometry of touch. The moment you surrender the tyranny of thought and sink into the primal rhythm of embodied awareness, something miraculous begins to stir. The dissonance that has long echoed through your muscular corridors starts to dissolve. The breath deepens without command, and the mind, long enslaved to analysis, sinks into reverence, as if recalling a forgotten name. In that silence, you may feel the arrival of a stillness not born of absence, but of ancient knowing, a state beyond seeking, because it is the place from which all seeking arises. This transmission is not metaphor, nor mere esoteric indulgence. It is grounded in the luminous science of the sages, the embodied gnosis of those who mapped the subtle anatomy of awakening. Thoth, custodian of primordial wisdom, encoded within his sacred tablets the existence of a portal nested behind the auricular veil, a point of resonance that, once activated with conscious precision, initiates a deep recalibration of the somatic field. Hormonal systems begin to attune, emotional residues release, and even the archaic sleep-wake cycles are re-enchanted. Such wisdom was not hidden to keep it from you, but to protect it until you were ready to remember. That moment is now. You are not merely a witness to this revelation, you are its vessel. If you find yourself stirred, not by what is spoken, but by what vibrates in the silence between these words, offer your presence with a like. It is the resonance of the awakened that strengthens this current. And if your soul feels the magnetic pull of deeper remembrance, I invite you to subscribe and walk with us through these sacred thresholds. In your presence, this work breathes. In your support, it expands. Let us rekindle the ancient fire and reawaken the temple within. The modern view of the body is cold, limited, fragmented. Bones, muscles, organs, separated like parts of a disassembled machine. A mechanism to be repaired, adjusted, patched. But this idea of the body as a machine is recent. It was born with mechanistic science, with Western laboratories, with the obsessive search for control. Before then, the body was seen differently. It was a temple, a living space, a conduit between worlds. The most ancient traditions recognized it as the place where the visible and the invisible meet. The body was not the goal of existence, but its frontier, and every spot on the skin, every breath, every pulse carried subtle meanings, silent energies, vibrational flows in dialogue with dimensions unseen by the eye. It wasn't superstition, it was wisdom. Wisdom observed, perceived, passed down. And the Eastern monks knew it. They spent years in meditation not to escape the body, but to inhabit every part of it profoundly. The shamans of the forest spoke to the spirits not only with words or plants, but with gestures. They touched specific points to activate visions, release memories, heal invisible wounds. Touch was a language, and that language spanned time and space. The yogis of India developed such refined techniques of vibrational control that they could modulate the frequency with a finger, a breath, a thought. For them, the body was an energetic map. And where modern medicine sees bone and cartilage, they saw vortices, currents, and nodes of energy that open with awareness. But this awareness isn't automatic, it must be awakened. And this is where a point few people know about comes into play. There are regions in the body that function as bioenergetic portals. They are transition zones, meeting points between the physical and the subtle. And one of these is located precisely where no one pays attention. Near the ear, between skin and bone, where the right touch creates a vibration that doesn't stop at the surface. It resonates, opening the way. Texts attributed to Thoth mention this practice. He called it the art of silent invocation. A gesture, a breath, and the bridge between the worlds opened. Not with words, but with presence, not with force, but with vibration. This technique was taught only to initiates, because it required more than physical skill. It required aligned awareness, pure intention, inner mastery. The gesture itself wasn't enough, it was the energy behind the gesture that created the phenomenon. And this changes everything, because if the body is a temple, there's no point in treating it like an object. There's no point in forcing it, punishing it, ignoring it. It makes sense to listen to it, touch it with respect, inhabit it with presence. Healing doesn't begin when you interfere. It begins when you recognize that the body knows the way. It simply needs to be remembered, and that memory doesn't occur in the mind. It happens in vibration. It's like tuning an instrument. A distunned body vibrates with tension, fatigue, anxiety. But when a precise gesture hits the right spot, the frequency changes. The body remembers the original melody. And it is from that memory that the process begins. The gesture that silences the internal noise and opens the first door. From the moment you recognize the body as a temple, the way you move within it changes. Gestures are no longer automatic, touch is no longer distracted, everything takes on intention. And it is at this precise point that a simple movement can become a portal. It requires no strength or elaborate techniques. Imagine 2 fingers, just 2, brushing an almost forgotten area, as if caressing the very space between the physical and the subtle. This gesture doesn't provoke, it invites. And if done with presence, it triggers an immediate response. The entire body responds with a silence unheard by the ears. It is an internal pause. You feel a suspension that switches off survival mode, that calms the urgency, that effortlessly interrupts the cycle of tension. This gesture, simple at first glance, is present in ancestral rituals not as a medical technique, but as a spiritual expression. In indigenous ceremonies, the delicate touch behind the ear was performed by elders as a blessing, a return to the center, a reconnection to the origin. In Eastern traditions, the same gesture appears in moments of energetic transition, as a vibrational reminder that it's time to let go of control and trust the flow. In ancient Egypt, this touch was part of rituals for purification and alignment of the spirit, but it was always performed in silence. Always in silence, because for the initiates, silence wasn't the absence of sound, it was the frequency of creation. Thoth taught that every word is born from silence, that the most powerful sound isn't one shouted, but one that vibrates where no external noise reaches. And this gesture is a silent word spoken through the skin. It acts directly on the invisible language of the nervous system. And that language doesn't understand haste, it doesn't understand force. It understands intention, it understands gentleness, it understands presence. When you touch with that vibration, you send a direct message to your inner field. Now you can rest, now you are safe, and in that safety, the body begins to reorganize, not because it is forced, but because it is remembered. Curiously, many resort to this gesture intuitively, without knowing it. In moments of pain, fear, or fatigue, the hand moves to the side of the head, resting behind the ear, as if seeking refuge. It's not a coincidence, it's cellular memory. It's the body trying, in its own way, to return to center. And that journey begins right there, in that gesture, in that instant when you silence the external noise with an internal touch, and the touch, however small, becomes the first key. A vibrational key that, when activated, doesn't just open sensations, it opens space. That gentle pressure behind the ear, if done with true intention, doesn't stop at contact. It passes through the skin, penetrates the tissues, and reverberates more deeply than you imagine. Because right there, exactly there, lies one of the most overlooked points in modern wisdom, yet one of the most revered in ancient spiritual traditions. It's no coincidence, it's a direct access. This subtle point is connected to the vagus nerve. A simple name, but one that hides a monumental function. It's a sacred electrical network that runs through the brain, heart, lungs, intestines, and subtle regions that science still doesn't fully understand. It's what decides, in the absolute silence of your system, whether the body will live in a state of war or healing, tension or regeneration. It's the nerve that it says fight, or the nerve that says trust. And the most impressive thing is that this choice happens without you knowing it. It happens thousands of times a day. And if the body is stuck in constant alert, the system never shuts down. Fatigue becomes chronic, sleep is never deep, digestion becomes unbalanced, the mind gets stuck in a loop. And it all starts from that hidden energy center, accessible with a simple gesture, yet acting like a switch. This point behind the ear was not ignored by the spiritual civilizations of the past. On the contrary, in the most ancient Egyptian doctrines, Thoth described it as one of the seals of vibrational rest, a point of energetic transition capable of activating the internal state known as me with T, the supreme balance, not static but dynamic between opposing forces, tension and relaxation, action and abandonment, presence and emptiness. When this seal is activated, something silently changes. The body stops protecting itself and begins to repair itself. The energy previously used for vigilance, resistance, and defense is redirected toward healing. And the most profound part is that this happens effortlessly, without complicated techniques. The response is organic, because it's not the touch that forces healing, it's the body that recognizes the gesture as permission. This point, though small, has enormous potential for vibrational reorganization. It's like triggering a forgotten code, an internal command that interrupts the stress cycle and unleashes the natural flow of self-healing. And this code doesn't require drugs. It requires intention, presence, and awareness. The mystery schools used this knowledge in initiations, where silence was absolute. The touch behind the ear marked the moment when the initiate left the reactive mind and entered the space of the spirit. There, he no longer had to understand, he simply had to feel. And that sensation was so profound that it often brought the entire body into a state of vibrational stillness for hours. It's the same state you can experience by touching this point with reverence. Because when the body feels safe, it doesn't simply rest, it opens, frees itself, trusts again. And it is precisely at that moment that the invisible process begins. The forgotten ritual that reprograms the nervous system. The moment the body recognizes it is safe, something profound happens. It's not something you control with your mind. It's a response that comes from within, a silent recognition that echoes throughout every layer of your biology. Touch, when done with true presence, seems to release an ancient memory, not verbal, but skin deep. It's as if the body hears a voice it's been waiting for a lifetime, a voice that speaks not with sounds, but with vibrations. And that vibration says, everything's okay. Now, this area behind the ear has been called the same thing by different traditions. The ear of the soul, because it is there that the soul listens when the body begins to trust again. And it's not poetry, it's a precise fusion of neurobiology and the energetic field. Because it is in this spot, where the skin is thin and the nerve ending sensitive, that touch acts like a key. It not only activates physiological circuits, it awakens a sensation that no medicine can imitate, the feeling of being supported from within. The ancient masters knew this. In the regeneration rituals of ancient Egypt, initiates did not enter the deepest states of meditation without first performing this gesture. They used touch as a vibrational signal to silence the outside world and open the inner channel. They said it was the transition point between noise and the heart, a direct access to the vibrational state necessary to enter the halls of Amenti, not as an out-of-body journey, but as a vertical immersion into the center of one's being. By touching there, the initiates weren't just preparing the body, they were telling the spirit, now it's safe to return. Because the soul, when it senses the body at war, withdraws, stops expressing itself, protects itself. And when the soul protects itself, everything slows down. Creativity, healing, joy. But when the body lowers its guard, the soul descends, and it is in that descent that the field begins to reorganize from within. This reorganization can't be explained with logic, it's witnessed by the body. You notice subtle changes. Your breathing deepens effortlessly, your gaze softens, your heartbeat synchronizes with the environment. Your entire body begins to operate at a different rhythm, a rhythm of trust, integration, presence. And the most extraordinary thing is that it all begins with the simple recognition that there's no longer any need to fight. Touch tells the nervous system that the threat has passed, even if the outside world remains the same. Because it's not the environment that changes, it's the internal state that changes, perceives. And when that state changes, the body enters spontaneous healing mode, because the system knows what to do, has always known, it just needed permission to act. This permission is what touch provides, a vibrational authorization to stop defending and start repairing. Not with tension, but with tenderness. Not with resistance, but with kindness. And that kindness is, in reality, the greatest strength, because it reorganizes everything without having to break anything. And it is at this point of profound trust that the ritual begins. Because it's not just about touching, it's about how you touch, about the intention that vibrates behind the gesture. 2 fingers, aligned breath, total presence. When these 3 forces meet, what happens goes beyond physiology. The energy field shifts, and the nervous system, long in a state of alertness, begins to reorganize. And this reorganization is not a technical process, it's a silent ceremony between body and spirit. Every conscious breath sends a signal to the system, an ancient reminder that you can trust. And this phrase, vibrating in the field, has a real effect on neural connections. It's as if every fiber, every cell, every electrical impulse begins to tune into a new frequency. A frequency of permission, of abandonment, of presence. And as this happens, a forgotten memory is reactivated. A memory that belongs not to the rational mind, but to the soul incarnated in the body. A vibrational memory. The ancient alchemists knew this. They called it ether memory, a code imprinted in the subtle layers of the body long before any language or thought. This code is accessible only in specific states of consciousness. And one of the most direct ways to reach it is rhythmic tapping on the mastoid area, synchronized with the breath. This point, connected to the vagus nerve and energy reception zones, acts as a transmitter between the biological and subtle planes. When the gesture is performed regularly and with intention, it begins to dissolve what alchemists called mental lead, the psychic density accumulated by traumas, beliefs, fears, and chronic tensions. The lead that prevents the gold of consciousness from shining. The lead that weighs down the mind, making it anxious and reactive. By dissolving this vibrational lead, the body enters a new alchemy, the transmutation from a state of survival to a state of regeneration. This process doesn't happen quickly. It's not about accelerating results. It's about entering a new internal rhythm, a pulsation that comes from within and can only be heard when all around is silent. And in that living silence, every touch gains power, because it's no longer just an external movement. It's a vibrational invocation, an invitation for consciousness to return to the temple of the body. With each repetition, the gesture ceases to be a physical act and begins to be recognized by the nervous system as a familiar language. As if the body were saying, "I know it, I've been there before." And in that recognition, deep layers of tension dissolve. Muscles relax, the heartbeat stabilizes, the internal flow opens, the alchemy begins. And the most impressive thing is that all this happens with what you already possess. No drugs, no external stimuli, just presence, gesture, and breath. 3 elements that, combined in the right place, open a vibrational fissure. A passage that passes through the dense systems of matter and touches the most subtle plane of being. It is in this fissure that the impossible begins to become accessible. But what happens when this fissure is crossed with awareness? What does this gesture reveal when it becomes a true spiritual portal? This is the part that almost no one knows, and it is here that the most forgotten secret begins to emerge. The vibrational code of tenderness written in your DNA. It's when the mental lead dissolves that the body begins to listen to another frequency, more subtle, deeper, more intimate. And it all begins with a gesture that seems small, but which, performed like a sacred caress, transforms into a secret language that only your nervous system understands. This is the point where a silent reprogramming begins. There is no effort, no mental command, only recognition. The body recognizes this touch as something ancestral, as if saying, "I know it, this is certain." This touch restores what the ancients called primary security. the original vibrational state before fragmentation, before the fall, before fear. It's a return to a home without walls, but with a frequency. And when that frequency touches the skin and penetrates the nervous system, something sacred happens. The body stops fighting itself, the heartbeat slows, anxiety subsides without negotiation. The mental field, accustomed to survival, begins to allow. And in that allowing, the soul breathes. Thoth spoke of what we now call DNA not only as biology, but as light in the form of a serpent sleeping in coils, waiting for the right vibration to awaken. And that awakening doesn't happen with screams, shock, or force, it happens with tenderness. The vibrational tenderness of this gesture, which activates the forgotten code in every cell. A code accessible not through logic, but through surrender. And when it's activated, dormant parts of your being begin to awaken, not like an explosion, but like a memory. It's as if every cell remembers what it means to live in peace, as if the body finally understands its home. And this state, invisible to the eye, begins to impact the visible. Symptoms cease, inflammation dissolves, deep sleep returns, digestion balances, vitality emerges. Not through effort, but because you've touched a point and delivered your vibration with intention. It is at this point in the journey that the practice ceases to be an isolated action and begins to take shape as a rite that transforms the relationship between body and soul. Because it's no longer just about healing, it's about reconnecting to the vibrational origin of life. And when this begins to be done at the most sensitive hour of the day, on that threshold between waking and sleeping, what was once a gesture becomes a passage. If you practice this touch in the evening, before bed, something special happens. The body has already learned that it is safe, but now it learns that it is sacred, because the moment between the last thought of the day and the first taste of sleep is the most fertile for the invisible. The ancients called it the liquid hour, the moment when time slows, the mind relaxes, and the portals align. It is in this space that the gesture becomes a ceremonial key. It is no longer just a touch, it is a silent invocation, a vibrational declaration to the universe. I am ready to cross. And the body responds, the soul listens, and the field opens. The gesture, once technical, becomes a bridge, and that bridge connects not only you with your inner self, but with the subtle field where dreams, signs, and mysteries occur. In Hermetic nighttime practices, this moment was prepared with reverence. The touch behind the ear was combined with slow breaths and, at times, with vibrational words that sealed the soul's intention. The Egyptians called it the sign of the release of the Ka, a vibrational release that allowed the soul to journey spiritually with clarity, uninfluenced by fears, guilt, or the noises of the day. The body then passed from shell to temple, from structure to instrument. Because when you touch this point with presence, you don't just prepare yourself for sleep, you communicate to the universe that you are ready to access the invisible with awareness. It is the beginning of a crossing, not outside, but inside, within the vibrational field that reveals itself between the last thought and the first dream. And that's when the gesture begins to repeat itself, first intentionally, then naturally, until it becomes rooted and reprograms the body without you having to remember it. What happens when this gesture becomes a habit, when it no longer depends on effort, but on vibrational memory? This is precisely what we will reveal now, when the gesture becomes frequency and healing becomes natural. At this point in the journey, the gesture goes beyond being a conscious practice. It becomes a living memory, a vibration that the body carries with it even when you don't think about it. The touch transforms into a silent impulse, a constant reminder, and you are safe. After a few nights, this frequency begins to work even before the gesture. The nervous system, now familiar with the feeling of deep relief, anticipates the state of relaxation. It's as if the body learns to trust completely, not by logic, but by vibrational repetition. The mind, once obsessed with control, naturally surrenders to stillness. And that surrender is the true breeding ground for healing. You no longer need to induce sleep. It comes naturally, because the body has remembered the path to true rest. Inflammation decreases, digestion balances, mood transforms. The body's responses cease to be reactive, everything begins to self-regulate, as if following a forgotten code, a code restored effortlessly, only with presence. Thoth called this the tuning of the living temple. For him, the body was a divine harp. Simply tune one string and the entire melody changes, and the point behind the ear is one of those strings. When touched with truth, it tunes the entire field not by magic, but by vibration aligned with the origin. At this stage, self-healing is no longer a possibility. It becomes the body's natural state. Gesture becomes frequency, and frequency maintains balance even on difficult days, even when everything outside seems chaotic, because inside, something remains at peace. And it is here that the deepest teaching emerges, a teaching that cannot be read, but lived. A silence that cannot be explained, but felt. A symbol that logic cannot decipher, because it reveals itself the moment you stop searching. You remember the touch, the gesture, the dot behind the ear, but now, more than ever, you feel that all this was only a path to something greater, a symbol left by the soul so that one day you might recognize yourself again. This dot is not just physical, it is a signpost, a reminder, a whisper that says you already knew. When you touch it with presence, after having gone through everything, something different happens. You are no longer just calming the nervous system, you are telling it, through vibration, I have found myself. And in that instant, the body stops reacting, it begins to respond. And the answer comes in the form of silence, not empty, but filled with presence, soul, and memory. It is the state that the most ancient Hermetic writings called the spirit resting on its throne. The body no longer runs, the mind no longer commands. The soul sits in its rightful place, and the temple vibrates in harmony. This experience is not the end of a journey, it is the birth of a new cycle. Because now you no longer practice something. You live as if this gesture were engraved on your skin, in your cells, in your soul. And so, in the deepest silence, you return. Something in you has listened beyond words, and that something is sacred. If this message has stirred even a breath of ancient recognition within your being, know that you have crossed a threshold that many feel, but few truly see. This wasn't just a transmission, it was a mirror, a frequency, a bridge between worlds. Don't let this vibration dissolve into the ordinary. Honor it with a like, an act as subtle as breath and as powerful as intention. Let this gesture affirm your presence in this sacred circle of remembering. And in the comments, leave one single word, remember. That word is not just a memory, it is a portal, a resonance that opens doorways in others, a quiet flame that illuminates the path for those who arrive after you. When you name it, you call it forth not only in yourself, but in the collective field of awakening. And if something in you feels called to continue, if your soul vibrates with the pulse of this message, then subscribe to this channel. Not out of habit, but from a conscious choice to return again and again to a space where truth is spoken without noise. This is not a content platform, it is a sanctuary, a luminous thread woven across lifetimes. Here, we don't merely share knowledge, we reawaken the soul's ancient knowing. Thank you for your courage to stay until the end, for allowing yourself to feel instead of just hear. May this light follow you wherever you go, as a guide, a guardian, and a reminder. Walk gently, speak slowly, breathe deeply, and above all, never forget, you are the altar, you are the prayer, you are the portal.